Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city. Perhaps the next story about betrayal will be from your city, and we start. Michael and Linda Carter are an ordinary American couple, like thousands in sunny California. They live in the suburbs of Sacramento, in a neighborhood where neat one-story houses line wide streets and lawns are manicured with almost manic precision. 20 years of marriage is no joke, and their life has long since acquired the rhythm that is familiar to many. Predictable, cozy, sometimes a little tiring, but generally comfortable. They met in college when Michael was studying engineering and Linda was preparing to become an elementary school teacher. Now he is 45, she is 43, and their days flow according to a well-established scenario, like a train on rails. Their house is typical of a California suburb, one story with white walls and a terracotta-colored tile roof. It is built in ranch style, with a spacious front porch with a couple of wicker chairs and a small table where an empty coffee mug or newspaper is often forgotten. The facade of the house is decorated with several rose bushes, which Linda tends with varying degrees of success, sometimes with the enthusiasm of a gardener, sometimes with the laziness of a person tired of household chores. In the backyard, there is a small pool, the water slightly green from rare use, and a barbecue that Michael fires up from time to time on weekends. The two-car garage is filled not only with their old Ford and Toyota, but also with all sorts of junk. Boxes of Christmas decorations, old bicycles and tools that Michael vows to fix, but never gets around to. Inside, the house looks as if it was furnished with love, but 10 years ago. The living room, the heart of the house, is large, with a beige corner sofa, on which traces of time are visible, a couple of stains from spilled coffee and slightly worn armrests. Above the sofa hangs a painting with abstract brushstrokes in blues and yellows, a compromise between the tastes of Linda, who wanted something with soul, and Michael, who simply did not want to argue. Opposite is a flat-screen TV, not the newest, but quite functional, next to which there is a game console left over from the times when Emily was younger and still played Mario Kart with friends. The kitchen is adjacent to the living room, separated only by a counter with a pair of bar stools. It's bright, with white cabinets and a faux stone countertop on which there is always a toaster, a coffee machine, and a bowl of fruit, usually bananas and apples, which no one eats until they start to go bad. Next to the kitchen is a small dining room with a round wooden table, at which the family does not gather as often as Linda would like. They usually eat hastily, Michael with a plate in front of the TV, Linda at the counter with a phone in her hands, and Emily generally prefers to take the food to her room. The house has 3 bedrooms, the main one, where Michael and Linda sleep, with a large bed and a chest of drawers littered with change and receipts, Emily's room, about which a little later, and a third converted into a home office, where Michael sometimes works and Linda stores her sewing supplies, although she hasn't sewed in 3 years. Their morning ritual begins the same way. Michael wakes up at 6:30, even before the alarm, because his internal clock has long been set to work mode. He's an engineer for a local construction company, designing bridges and roads, nothing fancy, but a stable job with good health insurance and a pension. While the coffee maker gurgles, he turns on the news in the kitchen, mutters something about politics or the weather, and checks his phone. Linda gets up a little later, closer to 7 o'clock, and immediately starts getting ready. She teaches at an elementary school 3 miles from home. Her morning means getting ready quickly, light makeup, and a cup of tea with toast. She loves her job, although she sometimes complains about the noisy third graders and endless parent-teacher conferences. Emily, their 16-year-old daughter, is a different story. She's the last one to wake up, usually after Linda has already knocked on her door twice, shouting, "Emily, get up, you'll be late again." Emily's room is the chaos of a teenage soul. The walls are covered in posters, bands like the 1975, a collage of fashion magazine clippings, and a couple of Polaroid photos of friends. The bed is always unmade, the blanket is crumpled in the corner, and the floor is littered with textbooks mixed with the clothes, jeans, sweatshirts, and sneakers that she wears every day. Her desk is littered with notebooks, cosmetics, and a laptop, the screen of which is usually open to TikTok or chatting with friends. Above her desk hangs a board pinned with notes, concert tickets, and stickers she's been collecting since last year. Emily is a typical teenager with a sharp tongue and a look full of sarcasm. She is tall, almost as tall as Michael, with long dark hair that she usually wears in a messy bun. Her wardrobe is a mix of thrift store finds and H&M items, and her favorite phrase is seriously, pronounced with such intonation that any adult feels a little stupid. She is an average student at school. She struggles with mathematics, but she is a star in literature. She loves to sort through books and argue with teachers about the meaning of life. She has a best friend, Sophie, with whom she spends all her free time, and a boyfriend, Jake, with whom her relationship is sometimes stormy and sometimes cold, like the Californian weather in March. Emily's mornings are a rush. She jumps up half an hour before leaving, manages to put on her makeup, grab a granola bar, and run to the school bus, which is waiting at the end of the street. Linda always shouts after her something like, "Don't forget your homework," and Michael just shakes his head and says, "Just like your mother." During the day, while her parents are at work, Emily is either at school or hanging out with friends at a local cafe that serves cheap coffee and greasy donuts. Her world is a mixture of teen drama, sarcastic jokes, and dreams of one day leaving this suburb for Los Angeles or New York, where life, in her opinion, is real. And so their days flow by. Michael with his drawings and morning news, Linda with her students and a cup of tea, Emily with her sarcasm and dreams. The Carter's house stands in a quiet suburb, surrounded by the same houses, the same families, and it seems that nothing can disturb this rhythm. For now. Emily sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, with a dissatisfied expression on her face. Her laptop, as luck would have it, decided to update just when she urgently needed to finish a school project on literature and analysis of The Great Gatsby. The deadline was approaching, and the teacher, Mrs. Harper, did not tolerate lateness. Emily sighed, glanced at the clock. It was almost 7 in the evening, and decided that it was easier to take her mother's laptop than wait for her own to finish its endless improvements. Linda was just in the living room, engrossed in some series on Netflix, and would hardly have noticed that her device was missing. Emily snuck into her parents' bedroom, where Linda's silver MacBook lay on Linda's bedside table. It was slightly worn around the edges and had a daisy sticker on the lid, a gift from Emily for Mother's Day a couple of years ago. She grabbed her laptop, returned to the kitchen, and opened it, quickly entering the password she knew since childhood, Emily 2008. Linda wasn't very creative with these things. The screen lit up and Emily immediately opened Word to begin typing her notes about the symbolism of the color yellow in the novel. But before she had time to write even 2 sentences, a notification popped up in the upper right corner of the screen. It was from a messenger, not the usual WhatsApp that Linda used to communicate with colleagues and parents of students, but from some application with an unfamiliar icon, a black silhouette of a pen on a green background. Emily frowned. She had never seen her mother use anything like this. The notice read, "Cheryl, take your time, let him get used to the idea." The text was short but intriguing, like a line from a bad detective novel. Emily froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She knew that prying into other people's affairs was not the best idea, but curiosity, that eternal teenage curse, had already taken root in her head. Who is Cheryl, and what does he have to get used to? She thought, biting her lower lip. She glanced towards the living room, where Linda was still sitting, her face glued to the TV. The sound of the TV series, a kind of melodramatic rustle of voices and music, came through the open door. Emily convinced herself that nothing bad would happen if she just looked. This is not a hack. After all, the laptop is already open. She clicked on the notification and the messenger opened on the screen. The application was called Quill, apparently, something for anonymous communication, judging by the minimalistic interface. The chat with Cheryl was the only one in the contacts list, and Emily, holding her breath, began to scroll up the conversation. The first thing that caught my eye was the tone of the messages. Cheryl wrote confidently, almost authoritatively, like a teacher scolding a careless student, but with a hint of patronizing concern. Linda answered briefly, sometimes with doubt, sometimes with obvious interest. Emily read, and with each message her eyebrows rose higher and her heart beat faster. This was not just friendly chatter, it was a plan, carefully thought out and written out, like instructions for assembling furniture from IKEA. Only instead of a closet, they were collecting something sinister. Start small, Cheryl wrote in one of her first messages. Ask him to do something he doesn't usually like, but don't argue if he refuses. Just smile and say, okay, I can handle it myself. He should feel a slight pang of guilt. That's the first step. Linda replied, yesterday I asked him to do the dishes, even though it was his turn on Wednesday. He grumbled, but did it. Does that count? Cheryl immediately wrote back, great. Now next time, pretend that it's hard for you alone, but don't complain directly. Let him offer help. Emily blinked, trying to figure out what this was all about. She knew that her father hated washing dishes. It was an eternal joke in the family how he grumbled every time that it would be better if they invented self-cleaning plates. But for Linda to push him on purpose, it was strange. She continued reading, and the further she read, the darker the tone of the correspondence became. When he gets used to obeying small things, move on to the main thing, Cheryl wrote a little later. You said he's proud. That's good. Pride is a weakness. It's easy to break. Make him doubt himself. Mention in passing that he's become less attentive than before. Don't blame, just hint. He'll start trying to prove otherwise, and then you'll catch him. Linda replied, today she said that he forgot about the anniversary of our first meeting. He was surprised and began to make excuses, although I didn't plan anything like that. It seems to have worked. Cheryl sent a winking eye emoji and added, see, it's already in your hands. It will be easier. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't like her mother. Linda had always seemed soft, kind, and a little absent-minded, the kind of woman who baked cupcakes for school fairs and worried if Emily came home late. But here she looked, different, cold, calculating. Emily scrolled further through the chat, and then her gaze caught a phrase that took her breath away. The main thing is to prepare him for your mistake, Cheryl wrote. He must accept it as his fault. Start with hints that you are unhappy, that you lack attention. Then make sure that he catches you in the compromising evidence, but not right away. Let him be tormented by suspicion first. Linda replied, you mean Tom? I'm not sure if I should yet. Cheryl immediately responded, Tom or anyone else doesn't matter. What's important is that Michael swallows it and stays. I did that with my Paul. Now he won't even say a word if I'm late at work. He thinks it's his fault that he couldn't keep me. Emily froze. Volume. Which Tom? She knew only one Tom, Linda's colleague from school, a tall man with gray hair at the temples, who once repaired their barbecue in the yard while Michael was on a business trip. Is it really him? And what does it mean to force her to accept her betrayal? Her brain refused to put the puzzle pieces together, but her heart was already pounding as if she had run a marathon. She imagined her father, the calm, taciturn Michael, who drinks his coffee every morning and reads the news, and could not believe that her mother was capable of making such plans against him. She scrolled further down the chat, and every message from Cheryl felt like a hammer blow. Break his will gradually, she wrote. Let him think that he is to blame for everything. Say that he disappointed you, but with a smile, so that he does not suspect a trick. And when he gets to the point, he will be like an obedient dog. He will come running at the first call and will not even bark if something is wrong. Linda replied, sometimes I feel sorry for him. He's a good man. Cheryl waved it off. Pity is for weaklings. Do you want freedom or not? He must understand that your rules are his rules. Emily covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Her fingers were trembling, and a whirlwind of thoughts was spinning in her head. It wasn't her mother, or was it? She didn't know what to think. The correspondence ended with the last message from Cheryl, the same notification that popped up. Take your time, let him get used to the idea. What do you think? Because Linda is deceiving him. Or something even worse? She sat staring at the screen until the noise of the TV from the living room reminded her where she was. Linda was still there, a few meters away, unaware. Emily slammed her laptop shut, but Cheryl's words were already etched into her memory like a thorn. Her Gatsby project remained untouched, and only the lines about how to break her father's will and turn him into a shadow of himself stood before her eyes. She did not yet understand what to do with this knowledge. But one thing was clear. Her sarcastic view of the world had just collided with something that even she couldn't make fun of. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at her mother's closed laptop as if it were a bomb with a ticking timer. Her hands were still shaking, her fingers were clenching and unclenching into fists, and her heart was beating in her chest fast, hard, like a drum before a battle. The correspondence she had just read burned her from the inside, as if she had swallowed a hot coal. Cheryl's words, break his will, obedient dog, make him accept your betrayal, were spinning in his head like a broken record, and each repetition left behind a trail of horror. It wasn't just a shock. It was a cold, sticky fear that crawled under your skin and squeezed your throat, making it difficult to breathe. She glanced towards the living room. Linda was still sitting there on the couch, her legs tucked under her, the remote control in her hand. The light from the TV reflected on her face, and she looked so ordinary, so familiar. The mother who makes her toast every morning, grumbles about scattered sneakers, and hugs her before bed, even if Emily breaks out with a teenage, "Ma'am, that's enough." But now this woman seemed alien. It was as if someone else was hiding under her skin cold, calculating, ready to destroy everything that Emily considered her family. She looked away and buried her face in her hands, pressing them to her face. What should I do? She thought, and this question became the beginning of an endless internal monologue, which immediately swirled in her head like a storm. Her first impulse was simple, to run to her father, tell everything, right now. Michael was in the garage. She could hear him tinkering with some old toolbox, humming a tune from the 80s to himself. He was always there for her, even when she rolled her eyes at his jokes or grumbled that he didn't understand anything. He deserved to know, or not. Emily imagined walking into the garage, seeing his face a little tired, with wrinkles around the eyes, turning to her with a smile. "What's wrong, Em?" he will ask, wiping his hands on an old rag, and then she will dump everything on him. About Cheryl, about manipulation, about Tom, about betrayal. So what then? She saw how his smile would disappear, how his eyes would darken with pain, how he might not even believe her at first. And then he believes it and collapses. Her father, who fixes everything from broken chairs to her broken mood, will break himself, and it will be her fault. Because she opened Pandora's box. It was she who decided to look where they weren't invited. But he should know, whispered a voice inside her, persistent and sharp. This is betrayal. Mom betrays him, and he doesn't even suspect. He walks around the house, drinks his coffee, watches her news, and meanwhile she makes plans to turn him into. Into what? A robot? A shadow? This is unfair. He doesn't deserve this. Emily clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. She remembered how her father once sat with her all night when she was crying because of a fight with Sophie, how he silently brought her hot chocolate and said, "Everything will work out, Em. Just give it time." He was her support, and now this support was under attack. But another voice, quiet, cautious, almost cowardly, pulled her back. What if I'm wrong, she thought. Maybe these are just words. Maybe Mom is just chatting with Cheryl, the way people chat about diets that they will never start. She wrote that she feels sorry for him. Maybe she's not going to do anything. And if I tell Dad, and it turns out to be untrue, what then? He will begin to suspect her, they will quarrel, and everything will fall apart. And it will be because of me. I will destroy the family because of some stupid chat. Emily bit her lip, feeling tears welling up in her eyes, but she brushed them away with the back of her hand. She hated crying. It made her weak, and now she needed to be strong. It was necessary to decide. But how? She didn't trust her mother, not now that she'd seen those words. But she couldn't trust her father with this secret, either not because she doubted him, but because she was afraid of his reaction. What if he doesn't believe it? Will she say that she made it all up, that she's just a teenager with a wild imagination? Or worse, if he believes and leaves? Will she divorce Linda, sell the house, and leave Emily alone in this suburb with a mother who probably hates her for revealing her secret? Family, she thought, and this word echoed in her head with a bitter aftertaste. What is this even? I thought we were normal. Not ideal, but normal. Dad grumbles about the dishes, Mom worries about my grades, I roll my eyes at their rules. Ordinary life. And now what? All lies? Or not everything? Maybe I'm being too dramatic. Maybe it's just Mom's midlife crisis, and she's just fooling around with this chat. How am I fooling around with Sophie when we come up with plans to run away to Los Angeles? She remembered how she once overheard her parents talking through the closed bedroom door. Linda complained that she was tired of the routine, that she wanted something new, and Michael answered quietly, "We agreed, Lynn, together until the end." Then Emily didn't attach any importance to it. Adults are always whining about some of their problems. But now these words sounded different. Together until the end. What if for Linda this together is no longer the same as for Michael? What if she wants freedom, as Cheryl wrote, and is willing to sacrifice it for it? Emily stood up and walked around the kitchen, her sneakers squeaking softly on the tiles. She paused at the sink, looking at the stack of clean dishes Michael had washed that morning. He always left it to dry like this, neatly folded, although Linda grumbled that he would rather dry it with a towel. Such a small ritual, such a trifle, and now it seemed to Emily a symbol of something bigger. A symbol of trust that was crumbling before her eyes. She trusted her mother. She trusted her father. She trusted that their home was a safe place to be herself, even when the whole world seemed like crap. And now this trust was bursting at the seams, and she didn't know how to mend it. Tell or remain silent. This question pulsed in her head like a migraine. If she tells, she might save her father, but it will destroy the family. If he remains silent, he will keep everything as it is, but at what cost? To live with this knowledge, to pretend that I didn't see anything, to look at my mother and see in her not my mother, but who? Manipulator? A traitor? Emily gripped the edges of the tabletop, feeling the cold artificial stone dig into her palms. Her sarcasm, her armor against the world, didn't help. She couldn't laugh it off, couldn't say, seriously, and leave as usual. She remembered reading Hamlet for school last year. She liked this guy, all so gloomy, doubtful, torn between truth and duty. Then she thought that he thought too much, that it would be easier to just take it and do something. And now she herself was Hamlet, stuck in this damned, to be or not to be. Only instead of revenge for a murder, there was revenge for what? For the truth? For lying? Because her world turned out to be different from how she saw it? Emily looked at the laptop. He lay quietly, like a sleeping animal, but this correspondence was hidden inside him like a poison that had already poisoned her thoughts. She could open it again, reread it, make sure she wasn't making it up. But why? She already knew what she saw, knew it was real. She knew that her mother, or whoever she considered her mother, was making plans that Emily couldn't even fully comprehend, and she knew that the decision she would make would change everything. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by familiar things: a coffee machine, a bowl of bananas, magnets on the refrigerator, and felt like a stranger. The horror in her heart did not go away. He grew, spread out like a shadow on a fading day, and she understood that this evening was just the beginning. But she didn't yet know the beginning of what, and that scared her most of all. Emily didn't sleep. The clock on her bedside table showed 2:17 am, but the dream was somewhere far away, outside her room, outside this house, which now seemed to her like a cage with a trick. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, where the light from the street lamp cast faint shadows through the blinds. Her mother's correspondence with Cheryl played in her head like an endless horror movie, and every time she closed her eyes, the words popped up again. Break his will, obedient dog, accept your betrayal. It was too much. It's too hard to contain. It's too scary to remain silent. She sat up, throwing off the blanket, and just sat there for a minute, hugging her knees with her hands. Her inner monologue was still buzzing like a swarm of bees, but now it boiled down to one thing. She couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't pretend that I didn't know anything. I couldn't sit at breakfast tomorrow morning and look at my father, knowing that he was in danger. Her sarcasm, her habit of brushing off problems, it all crumbled under the weight of what she saw. She had to tell me, and tell me now. Emily stood up, put on a sweatshirt over her pajamas, and quietly left the room. The house was plunged into darkness. Only the faint light from the TV in the living room made its way through the crack under the door. Linda apparently fell asleep there without turning it off. Emily walked past, trying not to break the floorboards, and headed towards the garage. She knew Michael was there. He often stayed up late, tinkering with some of his projects, either fixing an old radio or sorting through boxes of junk that he promised to disassemble someday. It was his way of relaxing after work, his little sanctuary. She opened the door to the garage and was immediately greeted by the smell of gasoline, wood shavings, and something metallic. The light from the desk lamp fell onto the workbench where Michael sat, bent over a pile of wires and an old transistor. He was humming something under his breath. I think it was Sweet Home Alabama, and didn't notice her right away. Emily stood in the doorway, looking at him. His hair, slightly gray at the temples, was disheveled. His checkered shirt was rolled up to his elbows, and on his face was that calm expression that she knew so well. Her father, her support. And now she was going to destroy his world. "Dad?" She called quietly, her voice trembling despite all her attempts to appear calm. Michael raised his head, blinking in surprise. He put the screwdriver down and turned to her, wiping his hands on an old rag lying nearby. Why aren't you sleeping? It's already 3 o'clock, he said, and his tone was a mixture of concern and slight surprise. He patted the chair next to him. "Come here, sit down. Did something happen?" Emily stepped forward, but did not sit down. She remained standing with her arms crossed over her chest, as if that would protect her from what she was about to say. Her heart was beating so loudly that she was sure he could hear. She opened her mouth, but the words stuck, and she had to swallow to get them out. I saw something," she began, looking somewhere at the floor, at the concrete floor of the garage, covered with oil stains. "On my mother's laptop. I took it for a project, and there. A message popped up there, and then I opened the chat. With some Cheryl." Michael frowned, but his face was still relaxed. He clearly didn't understand what she was getting at. "Cheryl? Which one of her friends is this? The one who's obsessed with yoga?" he asked, trying to remember. He always confused the names of Linda's colleagues and acquaintances. "No," Emily shook her head, her voice becoming a little harsher. "This is not a friend. I don't know who she is. But he and his mother, they write about you. About how to break your will, how to make you obedient, and about betrayal. That mom wants you to accept it like it's normal." She blurted it all out in one breath, and the last words hung in the air, heavy as lead. Emily finally looked up at her father, waiting for what? Anger? Shock? Tears? But instead, Michael suddenly laughed. It was a short, sincere laugh, the kind that happens when a child says something ridiculous, like seeing a UFO in the yard. Are you serious?" he said, still chuckling, and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "What is this, some kind of teenage thriller of yours? Have you read your books and now see conspiracies in your mother's chats?" Emily froze. Her cheeks flushed with a mixture of shame and anger. She expected a lot, but not this. Not that he will simply brush it off as stupidity. "This is not fiction," she almost shouted, her voice breaking. "I saw it with my own eyes, Dad. Everything is written out there, like instructions. This Cheryl is teaching Mom how to manipulate you, how to make you feel guilty, how to break you." And there was Tom. She mentioned Tom. Michael stopped laughing, but his smile didn't disappear completely. She became a little tense, as if he still didn't believe it, but began to suspect that this was not just a fantasy. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and looked at her carefully. "Volume, are you talking about Tom who works at her school?" he asked, and for the first time a shadow of doubt flashed in his voice. Listen, are you sure you understood correctly? Maybe this is some kind of prank? Or, I don't know, maybe Mom is joking with someone. She's not like that. You know your mom. I thought I knew, Emily said quietly, her eyes filling with tears, but she blinked them quickly away. But everything is serious there, Dad. Cheryl writes as if she is an expert, as if she had already done this with her husband. And Mom, she answers her. She agrees. She even said that she feels sorry for you, but that doesn't stop her. Michael fell silent. His face was now serious, but there was still mistrust in it. He ran his hand through his hair, sighed, and looked at Emily again, as if trying to understand how far her fantasy had gone. He knew his daughter. She loved to dramatize, loved her sarcastic attacks, and sometimes saw more in people than there was. But there was something in her voice, in her eyes, that made him think. Something real. Okay, Em, he said finally, slowly choosing his words. Let's say you saw something strange. I'm not saying that I believe in all this conspiracy theory, but I'll check. Just to calm you down, okay? Tomorrow I'll talk to my mom or look at her laptop. But you do realize that this sounds like a TV series script, right? Manipulation, betrayal. This is not about us. Your mother and I have been together for 20 years. I would have noticed if something was wrong. Emily nodded, but there was a storm brewing inside her. He didn't believe it. He thought she was making it up, or exaggerating, or just didn't understand. And it angered her, but at the same time brought strange relief. She took the weight off her shoulders, told him, and now it was his problem. Or not. She watched him reach for the screwdriver as if he was going back to his transistor, and she felt that he had already dismissed her words. Are you really going to check? She asked, her voice becoming quieter, almost pleading. Michael nodded, looking at her briefly. Is it true? I promise. But you go to sleep, Em. Tomorrow is school, and I don't want you to nod off in class because of some spy stories. He smiled again, but now there was less confidence in this smile than before. Emily turned and walked towards the door, her steps heavy, as if her legs were filled with lead. She did what she wanted, she told. But instead of relief, she felt only emptiness. He didn't believe it. He laughed. And now she didn't know what was worse. The fact that he brushed aside the truth, or the fact that he still promised to check and, perhaps, find the same thing that she found. Her father, her calm, reliable Michael, was on the verge of something that could break him, and she herself pushed him there. The garage door closed behind her with a soft click, and Emily was left in the darkness of the hallway, listening to the television blaring somewhere in the house. She didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. This night changed everything, even if Michael didn't understand it yet. Michael couldn't sleep. After talking with Emily, he spent another 20 minutes fiddling around in the garage, trying to concentrate on the transistor, but his hands moved mechanically, and his thoughts went somewhere far away. His daughter's words, manipulation, betrayal, Cheryl, sounded in his head like an annoying noise that he could not drown out. He told her it was nonsense, laughed, and promised to check to reassure her. But now, sitting in the silence of the garage, he felt something moving inside him. Uncertainty. Doubt. What if Emily is right? What if there really is something there? He turned off the lamp, put away his tools, and returned to the house. The living room was empty. Linda had apparently already gone to bed, leaving the TV on some late-night talk show. Michael turned it off, and the house fell silent, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. He walked into the bedroom, where Linda lay on their large bed, wrapped in a blanket, her breathing even and calm. She slept, as always, on her side, her legs slightly crossed, with her hair scattered across the pillow. Michael looked at her for several seconds, trying to see something alien in her, something that would confirm Emily's words. But she looked the same as always. Hi, Linda, his wife. The laptop lay on the bedside table on her side, still with that daisy on the lid. Michael froze, looking at him. He felt stupid. A teenage fantasy, he told himself. Emily just read her books or watched enough TikTok dramas. And yet, he promised to check. Not because he believed, but because he didn't want her to think he wasn't listening to her. And he wanted to prove to himself that this was nonsense, that their boring, predictable, comfortable life does not hide any secrets. He quietly walked over to the nightstand, trying not to break the floorboards. Linda didn't move. Michael took the laptop, his fingers trembling slightly not from fear, but from the absurdity of the situation. He felt like a thief in his own home. He walked back into the living room, sat down on the sofa, and opened the lid. The screen lit up, asking for a password. Emily 2008. He entered it almost automatically. Linda never changed her passwords, and he knew this one from the time he helped her set up her mail. Emily was right, he was working. Michael didn't know where to start. He clicked on the desktop, where there were folders with names like lessons, recipes, vacation photos. Everything looked ordinary. He opened his browser and his history was full of queries like how to bake gluten-free cupcakes and schedule of parent-teacher conferences. Nothing suspicious. He was about to close the laptop, feeling like an even bigger idiot, when he noticed an icon in the right corner of the screen, a black pen on a green background. Quill, what Emily was talking about. His heart sank, but he immediately pulled himself together. It doesn't mean anything, just a messenger. He clicked on the icon and the application opened. One contact. Cheryl. Michael froze, his finger hovering over his mouse. He could close it right now, go to bed and laugh at himself in the morning. But instead he opened the chat, and I started reading. The first message that caught his eye was from Cheryl. Are you ready for the first step? Shatter his confidence. That's the foundation. Michael frowned as he scrolled up to get context. The correspondence dragged on for weeks, and the more he read, the more his stomach tightened into a tight knot. Cheryl wrote clearly, methodically, as if she were writing a manual. Start with the little things, one message said. Point out his mistakes, but gently. Tell him that he has become inattentive, that it was better before. He will begin to doubt himself, and this is what we need. Linda answered, Today I said that he forgot about my birthday last week. He was surprised and began to apologize, although I didn't expect anything like that. Cheryl immediately wrote back, Great. Let him think that he is to blame. This is the first brick. Michael blinked. His birthday. Linda never mentioned that he forgot. Yes, he didn't forget he gave her earrings. They had dinner at that Italian restaurant that she likes. What the hell? He continued to read, and every word Cheryl said was like a punch to the gut. When he's weaker, move on to step 2, she wrote. Get him used to the idea that you have personal freedom. Start staying late after work, don't explain too much. Let him get used to having his own life. Tell him you need space. He'll grumble, but if you did the first step right, he'll swallow it. Linda replied, Yesterday I said that I would be late at the meeting. He asked why it was so late, but I just smiled and left. I think he swallowed. Michael clenched his jaw. He remembered that evening. It was a couple of days ago. Linda actually returned later than usual, with a strange smile, and said that the meeting was running late. He didn't bother asking why. He trusted her. 20 years together, damn it. But now he saw that this was not a meeting. It was a test. And he passed it. Or failed. He scrolled further, and then his gaze caught on the most recent piece of correspondence. Cheryl wrote, The ending is the consolidation of a new reality. When he accepts your freedom, bring your lover home, right into your bed. This will break down the last barriers. He will either leave or give up completely, but if you did everything right, he will stay. My Paul stayed. Now he doesn't even ask where I was. Linda replied, Tom has agreed to come over next week. I'm not sure yet, but I'll try. Michael froze. His breathing became heavy and ragged, as if the air in the room had suddenly become thick. Volume. The same Tom who repaired their grill, who joked with him about football while they drank beer in the yard. Was this Tom supposed to come here, to their house, to their bedroom? He imagined it his Linda, with another man in their bed, and him, Michael, just... What? Is he looking? Silent? Does he accept? His hands clenched into fists, and he felt his nails digging into his palms. He leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. It was a nightmare. Not just a nightmare, but a reality that opened up before him like an abyss. He still didn't want to believe it. It was too wild, too unlike Linda. But the words were there, on the screen, in black and white. Step-by-step plan. Shattering his confidence is done. Accustoming her to her freedom is in the process. Bring your lover home next week. He imagined himself sitting at the same table, eating his coffee and toast, and at this time Tom. No, he couldn't even think of this thought. Michael closed the laptop, but that didn't help. Cheryl's words were already etched into his brain like a tattoo. He stood up and walked around the living room. His steps were heavy, loud in the silence of the house. He stopped at the window, looking out at the dark street, at their neat lawn, at the neighboring houses where everyone was sleeping, not suspecting that his world was collapsing. Emily was right. This is not fantasy. It was real. And now he didn't know what to do with this truth. He returned to the sofa, sat down, and opened his laptop again, rereading the last lines. Tom has agreed to come by next week. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to write something, erase it, break the screen, anything to stop this nightmare. But he just sat there, staring at the words that would change his life. Linda slept in their bedroom, in the very bed where Cheryl had planned for everything to end. And he, Michael, was here alone, with the truth that burned him from the inside. Michael sat on the couch, staring at the laptop screen, which now seemed to him not just a device, but a box of poison that he himself had opened. The chat with Cheryl was still open, and the words about anchoring the new reality pulsed before my eyes like an alarm. His fingers trembled, but he couldn't stop. Something inside him, a mixture of anger, fear, and some kind of morbid curiosity, pushed him further. He had to know everything. If his world is going to collapse, then let it collapse to the end. He scrolled through the list of contacts in Quill. There weren't many, and most looked like random names, maybe co-workers or parents of students. But one name stood out: Tom. Michael froze. His thumb hovered over his mouse, and the thought flashed through his head: don't do this. Close it and forget it. But he couldn't. He clicked on the chat, and the correspondence unfolded before him like a scene from a nightmare that he did not want to see, but from which he could not look away. The first message was from Linda, dated 2 weeks ago. You were right. He didn't notice. I said I'd be late, and he just nodded. Tom's answer came almost immediately. I told you, he's an easy target. The main thing is not to rush. Let him get used to it. Michael felt the blood rush to his face. Easy prey. It's about him. About a man who spent 20 years building this house, this family, this life. He clenched his jaw so hard that his teeth ground and continued reading. The correspondence was short, but each exchange of words was like a knife blow. Linda wrote carefully, with a hint of uncertainty. Sometimes I think it's too much. He's a good person. Tom answered with confidence, almost with mockery. Good people are the most pliable, Lynn. They don't like conflicts. You've already started, now finish it. Michael remembered Tom standing by their grill last summer, beer in hand, smiling and chatting about nothing. At the time, he seemed like just a nice guy, Linda's colleague who liked to tell jokes. Now he was someone else, the enemy. He leaned back on the sofa, closing his eyes. His world was not just collapsing, it was crumbling into dust. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of little things, morning coffee, joint trips to buy groceries, evenings in front of the TV, all this turned out to be a lie. Or not a lie, but something worse. A stage on which he played the role of a fool while Linda and Tom put on a play. He imagined Tom, his grin, his voice, his hands, which were repairing the grill, and now, perhaps, touching his wife. Michael opened his eyes and looked at the screen again. The correspondence with Tom was shorter than with Cheryl, but it hit harder. Cheryl gave instructions as if it were some kind of science experiment. He stood up and walked around the living room. His steps were heavy, almost muffled. He stopped at the window, looking at the dark street, but saw nothing: no lawn, no street lights, no neighbors' houses. All that was visible was their bedroom, their bed, and Tom, grinning, confident that he had won. And next to him is Linda, his Linda, who melts, who is ready for anything. Michael clenched his fists, feeling his nails dig into his palms, but the pain was somewhere far away, muffled by what was happening inside. Michael closed the laptop, but that didn't help. Tom's words, his boasting, his confidence that Linda was tamed were already etched in his memory. He sat in the dark, listening to the silence of the house, and felt everything he knew, everything he believed in, dissolve. His wife was not just a stranger, she was a trophy in the wrong hands, and he was a blind idiot who didn't see it. Before it's too late. Michael sat on the sofa in the living room, surrounded by the silence of the house, which now seemed to him not cozy, but ominous. Linda's laptop lay in front of him, closed, but its contents correspondence with Cheryl and Tom still burned in his memory like acid. Anger boiled inside, pushing him to scream, to make a scandal, to burst into the bedroom and shake the truth out of Linda. He imagined how her face, calm in sleep, would be distorted from shock, how she would make excuses, lie, cry. But he didn't move. No, making a scene is too easy. This will give her a chance to get out and him to lose control. He wasn't going to be the one to be broken, as Cheryl wrote, or the dummy, as Tom boasted. He will be smarter, colder, more prudent. Michael clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe more evenly. He needed information, not emotions, but facts. If Linda and Tom are playing this game, he won't just sit around and wait for the lover to come home like their plan was. He will start digging, quietly, unnoticed, collecting pieces of their puzzle until he understands how to turn it over. He opened the laptop again, but this time he didn't go back to Quill. Instead, he decided to come from the other direction through social networks. If Tom is Linda's colleague, he must have a life outside of their correspondence. And perhaps family, wife, someone who knows the other side of him. Michael opened Facebook and searched for Tom Harris. The profile was quickly found the same Tom, with the photo at the school board, with the same grin, which now seemed to Michael not friendly, but predatory. He scrolled through Tom's page, sports posts, school photos, nothing special. But in the family section, there was a name, Caitlin Harris, with a small profile picture of a woman with short blonde hair smiling at the camera. Tom's wife. Michael clicked on her name, and her profile opened in front of him. Caitlin Harris turned out to be an independent flower shop owner, as stated in her status. Cheryl's blossoms flowers for every soul. The next morning began as usual, but for Michael it was saturated with tension, which he carefully hid under the guise of a familiar routine. He woke up at 6:30, as always, before the alarm, but this time not because of his internal clock, but because sleep never came. He spent the whole night in the living room, rereading Linda's correspondence with Cheryl and Tom, turning over every word, every hint, every mockery in his head. His mind was like a taut string, ready to snap, but he forced himself to keep everything under control. Linda slept in their bedroom, unaware that he knew, and that knowledge gave him a strange sense of power. He won't scream, will not break furniture. He will be smarter. When Linda got up at 7 o'clock, he was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee into his old blue mug marked Best Engineer. She came in, yawning, her hair disheveled, wearing her usual floral robe, and gave him a sleepy look. "Good morning," she said, stretching and reaching for the teapot. "You're early today." "I couldn't sleep," Michael answered, trying to keep his voice as even as usual. He even added a slight smile, although everything was boiling inside. "I was thinking about work." Linda nodded without delving into it and began to get ready for work. Emily showed up about 20 minutes later, sleepy-faced and headphones in, grabbed a granola bar and muttered something about school. Michael looked at her a little longer than usual, remembering her trembling voice at night in the garage. She caught his gaze, and something flashed in her eyes, fear, question. But she quickly turned away and ran out the door, shouting, "Bye." Linda left soon after her, calling over her shoulder. "See you in the evening, don't forget about the trash." Michael nodded, although a completely different plan was already brewing in his head. As soon as the door closed behind Linda, the house fell silent, and Michael felt the tension release from his shoulders, but only for a moment. He returned to the living room, where Linda's laptop lay on the coffee table, still holding her secrets. He opened it and quickly took screenshots of the correspondence with Cheryl and Tom, every key message, every plan, every boast. He saved them on a flash drive, which he found in a drawer within office, and put it in his jeans pocket. This was his evidence, his weapon. But now he needed to act. He took out a piece of paper on which he had written down the contact information of Caitlin Harris, Tom's wife, the independent owner of the flower shop Cheryl's Blossoms. The phone number was there, 916-555-0423. Michael picked up his cell phone, an old iPhone with a cracked corner of the screen, and just stared at the number for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to say in his head. He decided to pretend to be a client. It was safe, natural, and gave him a reason to meet her in person. He needed to see her reaction, see if she knew something, and, most importantly, show her the truth. He dialed the number, holding the phone to his ear. The beeps went on for a long time, 1, 2, 3, and he was already beginning to think that she would not answer when a soft female voice finally said, "Cheryl's Blossoms, this is Caitlin. How can I help?" Michael swallowed, trying to sound casual. "Hello, Caitlin. My name is Mike. I would like to order a bouquet. Something special for an anniversary. Could we discuss this in person? I can come over today." There was a slight chuckle on the other end of the line. "Of course, Mike. I'm in the store until 6. Come by any time. The address is 1423 Oak Street. I'd be happy to help with something special." "Great," he replied, adding a note of enthusiasm to his voice. "I'll be there in a couple of hours. Thank you." He hung up, feeling his heart beating a little faster. This was the first step. He went into the bathroom, washed his face with cold water, looking at his reflection in the mirror. His face was tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but he forced himself to straighten up, smooth his hair, and pull on a clean shirt. He didn't want to look like a man whose life was falling apart. He wanted to look like a client. Ordinary, calm, unsuspecting. An hour later, Michael was already driving along the highway in his Ford, old but reliable, with slightly creaking seats. Caitlin's store was 10 miles from their suburb, in a small shopping area with neat storefronts and parking along the street. He found Cheryl's Blossoms right away, a small store with a wooden sign with painted roses on it and a glass door decorated with a bell. Michael parked, took the flash drive from his pocket and put it in another, checking that it was still there. He took a deep breath, got out of the car, and headed inside. The bell tinkled as he opened the door, and he was immediately enveloped in the sweet scent of flowers, roses, lilies, something else he couldn't identify. The store was cozy, wooden shelves with bouquets, baskets with greenery, a small counter by the window, behind which a woman stood. Caitlin Harris. She was in her mid-40s, with short blonde hair styled in a neat bob and light makeup that highlighted her sharp cheekbones. She was wearing a green apron with the store's logo, and she smiled at him the way all customers smile, warmly, professionally. "Are you Mike?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron and leaving from behind the counter. "Welcome. Something for an anniversary, right?" Michael nodded, trying to control himself. "Yes, exactly. I want something special. Maybe roses, or anything you recommend." Caitlin started talking about the options: red roses for passion, white for purity, maybe adding eucalyptus for scent. Michael listened, nodding, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He waited for a moment to change the conversation. Finally, when she fell silent, showing him a bouquet of roses and lavender, he said, "You probably know a lot about people, right? Through flowers, through orders. Does your husband understand this too?" Caitlin was slightly surprised, but smiled. "Volume. No, he's a teacher. Flowers are mine. It is more about children and mathematics." "Teacher," Michael repeated, pretending to be thoughtful. "Interesting. And he is, how can I say, reliable, I mean at home with you." She frowned, but did not yet suspect a trick. "Well, yes, we've been married for 12 years. Why are you asking?" Michael took a deep breath. The moment has come. He took his phone out of his pocket, opened the gallery where he had pre-loaded screenshots, and turned the screen towards her. "I'm not exactly who I say I am, Caitlin." My name is Michael Carter. My wife is Linda, and I think you should see it." She looked at the screen and her smile slowly faded. The first screenshot was from a correspondence with Tom. "You are almost mine. Just a couple more steps, and we will finally tame your husband." Caitlin blinked, her hand hovering over the bouquet. "This. What is this?" she asked, her voice becoming quieter. "This is your husband," said Michael, trying to speak calmly, although everything inside was trembling. "With my wife. They're planning something. Here's more." He showed the following screenshot from Cheryl. "Bring your lover home to cement the new reality." Caitlin stared at the screen, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She shook her head. "No, this is some kind of mistake. Tom is not like that. He couldn't." "I thought the same about Linda," Michael said, and there was a hint of bitterness in his voice. "But here's the proof. I found this on her laptop. They want to break me, and it sounds like your husband thinks he's already broken you." Caitlin took the phone from his hands, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the screenshots. She read each message, her eyes running over the lines, and with every second her breathing became heavier. She stopped at Tom's words, "I've tamed people like you dozens of times." Her gaze froze, and Michael saw something flicker in it: disbelief, pain, awareness. "Isn't this a fake?" she asked finally, looking up at him. Her voice was hoarse, almost pleading. "No," answered Michael. "I found it myself, and I don't know what to do. But I thought you should know." Caitlin placed the phone on the counter, her arms falling to her sides. She was silent, looking somewhere past him at the flowers, which now seemed like an absurd backdrop for this conversation. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said quietly. I'll sort it out. Thanks for showing me." Michael nodded in response, feeling the weight inside him ease a little. He didn't know what she would do next, but he made his move. Caitlin stood, still pale, clutching the edge of the counter as he turned and walked out of the store, leaving her with the truth that was now shared between them. The bell jingled behind him, and he stepped outside, knowing this was just the beginning. Caitlin stood behind the counter of her flower shop, still gripping the edge of the countertop, when Michael finished speaking. Her face, which had turned pale from shock after seeing the screenshots, now slowly took on a hard, almost icy expression. She looked up at Michael, and her gaze no longer showed the confusion that had flashed a minute ago. Disbelief gave way to cold determination, as if something inside her had clicked, switching her from prey mode to hunter mode. She let go of the counter, straightened up, and nodded, her voice becoming even almost steely. "Okay, Michael," she said, wiping her hands on her apron, as if shaking off the last vestiges of doubt. "If they think they can play with us like that, they are mistaken. I'm in. Let's make them regret it." Michael looked at her, slightly surprised by this sudden change, but grateful at the same time. He expected tears, hysterics, maybe even accusations against him, but instead, a woman stood in front of him, ready to fight back. He nodded in response, feeling something akin to hope rising within himself, not to save their marriages, but to take back the control that Linda and Tom believed to be theirs. "They want to take this to the final step," he said, recalling the correspondence. "Bring Tom to my house, to our bed. This is their plan, but we can turn it into a trap." Caitlin narrowed her eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line, but there was a cold glint in her eyes. "Yes," she answered. "Let them think that everything is going according to their scenario, and we will turn the game around. We need to talk somewhere where we won't be heard." "Not here," Michael agreed. The store was too open a place customers could walk in at any time, and he needed to concentrate, put out everything he knew, and listen to her ideas. He suggested a cafe a couple of blocks away, Brew and Bean, a small place with wooden tables and the smell of freshly brewed coffee, where they could get lost in the morning crowd. "In half an hour there?" he asked. "Yes," Caitlin nodded. "I need to close the store for a couple of hours. I will say that it is a personal matter. Meet me there." Michael walked out of Cheryl's Blossoms, the bell jingling behind him, and he breathed in the cool morning air, feeling the adrenaline begin to pulse through his veins. He got into his Ford, started the engine, and drove to the cafe, turning over in his head everything that needed to be said. Caitlin was on his side. That was more than he could have hoped for last night, when he sat alone in the dark with her correspondence. Now he had an ally, and together they could do something. Half an hour later, he was sitting at a corner table at the Brew and Bean, away from the window and counter, where the noise of the coffee machine and the chatter of the barista drowned out the conversations. The cafe was half empty, a couple of students with laptops, an elderly woman with a book, a man in a business suit, hastily finishing his espresso before work. Michael ordered black coffee, but didn't touch it, just held the mug in his hands, watching the steam rise from the surface. His thoughts were occupied with one thing: how to outplay Linda and Tom. The cafe door opened, and Caitlin walked in. She had exchanged her apron for a dark gray coat, her blonde hair slightly disheveled from the wind, but her face remained calm and collected. She noticed Michael, nodded to him, and walked over to the table, sitting down opposite him. The waitress came over and Caitlin ordered a latte, her voice as even as it had been in the store. When the waitress walked away, she looked at Michael, crossing her arms over her chest. "So," she began, her tone matter of fact, almost like a lawyer in court. "Tell me everything you know. When is it going to happen? What are they planning? How far along it is? I want to know every step." Michael nodded, feeling her determination rub off on him. He leaned a little closer, lowering his voice so they wouldn't be heard at the neighboring tables. "I found this last night," he began, taking the flash drive out of his pocket and placing it on the table between them. "Here are screenshots. Linda's correspondence with Tom and with Cheryl, who gives her instructions. They want to break me. First to undermine my confidence, then to accustom me to the idea that Linda has personal freedom, and in the end, Tom should come to our house. This week. The exact day is not specified, but he wrote that next week, and this has already begun. They want me to accept this him in our house, in our bed, as the new reality." Caitlin listened, her eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt. When he mentioned the bed, her fingers trembled slightly, but she quickly pulled herself together, clenching them into a fist. She waited until he finished and only then spoke. "This week," she repeated, her voice as cold as ice, "so we don't have much time. Tom didn't tell me anything about visits. He rarely talks about work at all, but I noticed that he began to stay late more often. Now it's clear why." Michael nodded, his gaze falling on the flash drive. He wrote that he tamed her, that she was almost his, and that I won't even say a word when he fell silent, unable to finish. His throat tightened, but he forced himself to continue. "They think I'm blind, that I won't notice anything until it's too late." Caitlin pursed her lips, her gaze sharp as a blade. "He's wrong," she said, "and she does too. They think we are pawns in their game, but we will take over. Let Tom come. We'll be ready." Michael looked at her, feeling her confidence fuel his own. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "If he comes, I won't be able to just sit and watch. But I don't want a scene until I'm sure we've got them down." Caitlin picked up her latte, took a small sip as if it would help her think, and put it back. Her movements were measured, but there was a fire in her eyes. "We'll give them what they want," she said. "Let them think that everything is going according to plan. Tom will come to your house. Linda will be sure that you don't know anything. But we will make sure that this becomes their failure. We need to record everything, video, audio, whatever. Evidence they can't deny. And I want to be there. I want to look him in the eyes when he realizes that he lost." Michael thought about it. The idea was risky, but it made sense. If Tom and Linda wanted to take this to the final step, he could use their own plan against them. He imagined Tom walking into their house, wearing the same grin as in the Facebook photo, confident that he had won. And then a trap. "This week," he repeated, tapping his finger on the table. "I can pretend that I'm leaving. Tell Linda that I have urgent work, a business trip for the day. She will think the house is free. Tom will come, and I'll be back, with a camera or with something else." Caitlin nodded, her lips curling slightly into a dark smile. "And I can come with you," she said. Michael leaned back in his chair, looking at her. Her cold determination was infectious. He felt the anger he had suppressed all night turn into something sharper, a plan, a weapon. They won't just defend themselves. They will strike first. "Okay," he said finally. "This week, Tom will come and we will wait." Caitlin nodded, her gaze hard as granite. They sat in the cafe for another half hour, discussing the details. Friday morning at the Carter house began with the usual bustle, but for Michael it was saturated with hidden tension, which he carefully disguised as a daily routine. He had woken earlier than usual, before the sunlight had even broken through the blinds, and was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the plan he and Caitlin had discussed in the cafe. Linda slept next to her. Her breathing was even, calm, and Michael looked at her, feeling a mixture of anger and cold determination. She didn't know that he had seen her correspondence. She didn't know that he was no longer the person she took him for. Today, he will begin to play his role, the role of a husband who suspects nothing, but at the same time keeps everything under control. He stood up, walked into the kitchen, and turned on the coffee maker, letting the familiar gurgle fill the silence. Linda appeared about 20 minutes later, still in her flowery robe, with disheveled hair and a slight smile that now seemed false to him. Emily ran after her, grabbed a granola bar, and ran out the door, muttering something about the bus. Michael waited for the right moment, and when Linda poured herself some tea and sat down at the table, he began. "Lynn," he said, trying to make his voice sound a little tired, but natural, "I got a call from work yesterday. Need to go to the office in Auckland. Urgent project, something with drawings of a bridge. I'll have to leave for a day or two, probably tomorrow morning." Linda looked up at him, her eyebrows raised slightly, but there was nothing in her face that gave her away. She nodded, taking a sip of her tea. "Tomorrow? Okay. When will you be back?" "Sunday morning, most likely," he answered with a shrug. "Depends on how quickly we figure it out. I don't want to, but you know work." She smiled, that soft smile that he had once loved, but now hated for its duplicity. "Of course, I understand. Just don't forget your phone charger. Otherwise, you'll be calling from someone else's number again." Michael squeezed out a light laugh, although everything was boiling inside. He nodded, finished his coffee, and went into the garage, supposedly checking the car before the trip. But in fact, he had already done something else at night. While Linda was sleeping, he synced her laptop with his phone. It was not difficult. He found the notification function in Quill and connected it to his number via the cloud, disguising it as backup. Now every message Linda sends or receives will be sent to him in real time. He wasn't going to remain ignorant. As soon as Linda left for work and Emily left for school, Michael returned to the house and checked his phone. Nothing new yet, but he knew she couldn't remain silent for long. He sat down on the sofa, opened his laptop, and waited, holding his phone next to him. An hour later, his patience paid off. The screen blinked, and the first notification from Quill arrived. Linda wrote to Cheryl, "Michael is leaving tomorrow on a business trip." The first line read, "He'll be back on Sunday. The house will be free." Cheryl's answer came almost immediately. "Perfect. Time to move on to the finale." "Is Tom ready?" Linda replied, "I think so. I'll text him now." Michael clutched the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He waited with bated breath, and after a few minutes he saw a new correspondence, now with Tom. "Come on Saturday," Linda wrote. "Michael will leave in the morning. We will be alone. I want this to be in our home, in the bedroom." Tom answered quickly, "Seriously. Finally, I'll be there at 6. It's going to be hot." Linda sent a winking eye emoji and added, "Waiting. I want you to stay the night." Michael read this, and his stomach tightened into a tight knot. Saturday, tomorrow. They were going to have sex in their bedroom, in their bed, while he was supposedly on a business trip. This was their final step that Cheryl was talking about, but now it will be his trap. He turned off the phone, feeling his anger rise again, but quickly suppressed it. He had a plan, and he wasn't going to ruin it with his emotions. He dialed Caitlin's number, and she answered on the second ring. "Caitlin, this is Michael," he said, trying to speak quietly, although no one was home. "Everything is confirmed. Tom will come tomorrow, Saturday, at 6. Linda just texted him. They're planning. Well, you know." There was a deep breath on the other end of the line, and then Caitlin's cold, firm voice. "Great. So tomorrow. We'll be ready. What needs to be done?" "I'll see you today," Michael replied. "We need to buy a couple of things. Scotch tape, rope, so that everything goes as it should." "Tape and rope?" she asked again, and a shadow of surprise flashed in her tone, but was immediately replaced by a gloomy note. "Fine. Meet me in an hour at the Hardware Haven on Maple Street. Everything is there." Michael hung up, got ready, and drove to the local hardware store. The Hardware Haven was small but well stocked with shelves of tools, nails, paint, and everything needed for a renovation, or, in their case, something else entirely. He parked, got out of the car, and noticed Caitlin already standing at the entrance. She was wearing the same gray coat as yesterday and dark glasses, which she took off when she saw him. Her face was calm, but her eyes sparkled with the same determination as in the flower shop. "Let's go," she said, nodding towards the door. "Let's take what we need and discuss it." They went inside, and Michael went straight to the rope section. He took a roll of strong nylon rope, white, with a smooth surface, and held it in his hands, testing its strength. Caitlin stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. "Do you think this will do?" he asked, turning to her. She nodded, her lips curling slightly into a dark smile. "Yes, durable. Just for the American approach," she said, and there was a hint of dark humor in her voice. "Everything's big here, right? If you're going to catch it, then it's reliable." Michael chuckled, although the laugh came out forced. He put the rope in the basket and moved on to the shelf with the tape. There were several types: silver construction tape, black electrical tape, and transparent stationary tape. He took a wide piece of silver tape with strong adhesive and showed it to Caitlin. "This is for silence," he said, lowering his voice, "so as not to shout if anything happens." Caitlin looked at the roll, her eyebrows raised slightly, but she nodded again. "Practical," she replied. "Americans like everything to be done quickly and without unnecessary noise. It's like in kidnapping movies, but in reverse." They both fell silent, realizing how strange their words sounded in an ordinary store, among the shelves with nails and screws. Michael threw the tape into the basket, and they went to the checkout. While the salesman, an elderly man with a gray beard, was checking out their purchases, Caitlin leaned over to Michael and said quietly, "You know, I'm almost glad we're doing this. Let them think that they are smarter than everyone else, and we will show how it happens when the wrong ones are tamed." Michael nodded, paying in cash so as not to leave a trace. The seller put the rope and tape into a paper bag, looking at them briefly, but said nothing. They walked outside, and Michael turned to Caitlin. "Tomorrow at 5, he said. "Meet me around the corner from my house. I'll leave in the morning and pretend I'm on a business trip. Linda will think everything is clear. Tom will come at 6. We'll go in quietly." Caitlin nodded, clutching the bag in her hands. "I'll bring the camera," she said, "and tape and rope will come in handy. Let them try to get out when we catch them." They shook hands, their grip as firm as a pact. Michael got into the car and drove home, feeling a plan begin to take shape. Linda thought he would leave. Tom thought he had won. But Saturday will not be their triumph, but their trap. The tape and rope lay on the passenger seat, silent witnesses to their American approach, and Michael allowed himself a grim smile. Everything will be decided tomorrow. Saturday began for Linda with a slight sense of anticipation, which she carefully hid behind her usual morning routine. She woke up in a good mood, humming a tune to herself while she made some tea. Michael, as promised, went on a business trip. She saw him pack a small bag in the morning, throw a phone charger and a couple of shirts into it, kiss her on the cheek, and go to the car, muttering something about drawings in Oakland. Linda followed him out the kitchen window, watching his Ford drive out of the yard, and smiled to herself. Everything was going according to her plan, or rather Cheryl's plan. The house was free, Emily had gone to a friend's house for the weekend, and now she had everything she needed to complete their final step. She returned to the living room, picked up her phone, and opened Quill, sending Cheryl a quick message. He's gone. All clear. Tom will be here at 6. The answer came almost instantly. Great. Today you will secure everything. Take your time, enjoy it. It's yours. Linda read this, feeling a strange excitement growing inside her, a mixture of triumph and slight fear, but she brushed off the latter. Cheryl was right. Michael didn't suspect anything. He was too predictable, too trusting. She wrote to Tom, I'll expect you at 6. Come through the back door, just in case. His answer was laconic, I will. Get ready. The day passed slowly, and Linda kept herself busy with small things to distract herself. She cleaned up the kitchen, watered the roses on the veranda, even turned on the TV, but she couldn't concentrate on the next TV series. Her thoughts were on Tom, his grin, his confidence, the way he looked at her in the school hallway when no one was looking. She imagined how he would enter the house, how they would go up to the bedroom, how she would finally take what Cheryl said she deserved, her personal freedom. By 5 o'clock, she had taken a shower, put on her best lingerie, black with lace, which she had bought a couple of months ago just because, and a dress that emphasized her figure. She looked at herself in the mirror, straightened her hair, and smiled. Everything was perfect. By 6 o'clock, Linda was waiting at the back door, listening to the sounds outside. At exactly 6:02, she heard footsteps, and her heart skipped a beat. She opened the door, and there stood Tom, wearing jeans and a dark shirt, with that same smirk she knew so well. He stepped inside without saying a word and closed the door behind him, immediately pulling her towards him. Linda laughed, moving away slightly, but her eyes sparkled. Take your time, she said, her voice soft, playful. We have the whole night. I've waited too long for this, Tom replied, his hands sliding around her waist. Where is your bedroom? Linda took his hand and led him through the kitchen, through the living room, up the stairs. She felt confident in her own territory, in complete control of the situation. They went up to the second floor, and she opened the door to the bedroom, their bedroom, the same one where she slept with Michael for 20 years. The bed was neatly made. The light from the lamp on the nightstand fell softly, creating a cozy atmosphere. Linda turned to Tom, ready to say something witty, but at that moment everything changed. The door of the closet against the wall swung open and Michael stepped out. His face was hard, his eyes burned with cold anger, and in his hands he was clutching something that Linda did not have time to see. Caitlin appeared next to him, her blonde hair flashing in the darkness, and she had a spray can in her hands. Linda froze, her mouth opened, but she didn't even have time to scream. Tom turned around, his grin turning to surprise, and at that moment Michael stepped forward. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Michael growled, and his fist slammed hard into Tom's jaw. The blow was fast, precise, with a dull sound as if something had cracked. Tom staggered, his eyes rolled back into his head, and he collapsed on the floor, passing out instantly. Linda gasped, stepping back, her hands instinctively rising to her face, but Caitlin was already there. Not so fast, Caitlin said, her voice icy, and the next second she pointed the can directly at Linda's face. There was a sharp hissing sound, and a cloud of pepper spray hit her eyes. Linda screamed, squeezing her eyes shut, her hands flying to her face, trying to erase the burning sensation, but it only made the pain worse. She stumbled and fell to her knees, coughing and choking, tears streaming down her cheeks, mingling with the acrid smell of the spray. Michael wasted no time. He grabbed the ball of rope he and Caitlin had bought yesterday and rushed to Tom as he lay unconscious. His movements were quick. Practiced, he tied Tom's wrists behind his back, tightening the knot so tightly that the nylon dug into the skin. Caitlin, ignoring Linda's wheezing, took the tape from her coat pocket and tore off a long piece. She leaned over Linda, who was still trying to catch her breath, and with cold precision taped her mouth shut, muffling her moans. She then grabbed a second piece of rope and tied her hands while Michael finished with Tom. Everything happened in a matter of minutes. Linda was lying on the floor, her dress riding up, her eyes were watering, and her mouth was sealed with tape, from under which muffled sounds could be heard. Tom lay nearby, still unconscious, his head thrown back, and his bound hands twisted unnaturally. Michael stood over them, breathing heavily, his fists still clenched, as Caitlin took a step back, wiping her hands on her coat as if she had just finished a dirty job. They thought it was their show, Michael said, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. He looked at Linda, who was trying to mumble something through the tape, but her eyes were full of shock and pain. Now, what do you say? Caitlin leaned over to Tom, checking to see if he was breathing, and nodded to Michael. Linda jerked, her legs scraped weakly on the floor, but the rope held her tightly. She looked at Michael, her eyes darting between him and Caitlin, and now there was not only fear, but also awareness. She realized that her plan had failed, that Cheryl had been mistaken, that Michael was not the obedient dog she had expected. Michael met her gaze, and there was not an ounce of pity in his eyes, only cold, hard determination. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" he said, leaning closer to her. "You thought I'd just move away and leave you with him? You're wrong, Linda." Caitlin stood nearby, arms crossed, her face as impenetrable as a mask. She looked at Tom, then at Linda, and her lips twitched slightly in a dark smile. "Welcome to the new reality," she said quietly, repeating Cheryl's words, but with a completely different meaning. "This is our final step." The room froze in tense silence, broken only by Linda's wheezing and Tom's weak breathing. Michael and Caitlin stood above them, their shadows falling on their bound lovers, and in that moment it was clear that the show that Linda and Tom had planned had turned against them. The Carters' bedroom, once a place of comfort and familiar family life, has now turned into the stage of a gloomy performance. Linda lay on the floor, her hands bound with rope, her mouth taped shut, and her eyes still red from the pepper spray, darting between Michael and Caitlin. Tom lay nearby, still unconscious, his head thrown to the side, his bound wrists red from the tight knots. Michael stood over them, his breathing heavy, but his voice when he spoke was cold and sharp as steel. He looked at Linda, and in his gaze there was not a hint of the love that once connected them, only contempt and pain, which he was no longer going to hide. "You thought you could pull this off, right?" he began, his voice trembling with suppressed anger, but he controlled himself so that every word hit the target. "You thought I was such an idiot that I wouldn't notice anything? That I'll just drink my coffee, read the news while you're here?" With him, he nodded at Tom without taking his eyes off Linda. "You're pathetic, Linda. Pathetic and vile. For 20 years I built this family, worked so that we had everything, and you decided that you could just take it and trample on it." Linda tried to mumble something through the tape. Her body twitched, but the rope held tightly. Her eyes widened and panic flashed in them, but Michael didn't stop. He leaned closer, his face just inches from hers, and continued, his voice even lower, even harsher. "Do you know who found your correspondence? Emily, our daughter. She was borrowing your laptop for some stupid school project, and your dirty laundry came out. She read everything about Cheryl, about Tom, about how you were going to break my will, make me an obedient dog. She saw how you planned to bring him here, to our house, to our bed. And now she knows who you really are. Not a mother, not a wife, but a traitor who sold her family for some." He fell silent, glancing at Tom for this. Linda froze, her eyes filled with tears, but now they weren't just tears from the spray. The mention of Emily hit her harder than anything else. She tried to shake her head and mumble something, but the tape muffled everything, leaving only muffled sounds. Michael straightened up, crossed his arms over his chest, and continued, his voice a little louder, but still cold as a winter wind. "Emily came to me at night in the garage. She was shaking, Linda." Her voice broke as she spoke. "She didn't know what to do. She wanted to protect me, but she was afraid to destroy everything. And you destroyed it. You betrayed not only me, but also her. Our daughter, who trusted you, who thought you were a good mother. Now she knows the truth that you lied to both of us, made your plans with Cheryl, with this piece of shit." He nodded again at Tom, and did not think about what would happen to her when everything was revealed. Linda lowered her head and her shoulders shook, but Michael did not relent. He felt the words rush out of him like a torrent he had been holding back for too long. He wanted her to hear everything, to feel at least part of the pain that he felt when he read her correspondence, when he imagined Tom in their home, in their life. You thought I was blind, right? That I won't notice how you linger, how you smile at your phone, how you lie to my face. But Emily noticed, and I noticed. And now you're here, tied up on the floor, because your new reality turned out to be a trap. You betrayed your family, Linda. You threw away everything we had for this. At this moment, Tom began to move. His head jerked, he let out a faint groan, and his eyes slowly opened. He blinked, trying to focus, and then tried to move, but the rope held his hands behind his back. His gaze darted around the room, first to Linda lying next to him, then to Michael standing over him, and finally to Caitlin, who had remained silent the entire time, crossing her arms and watching with a cold grin. Tom froze, his face turned pale, and his mouth opened, but he didn't have time to say anything. "What? What the hell?" he croaked, his voice weak but full of shock. "Caitlin, what are you doing here?" Caitlin stepped forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor as she leaned towards him, her face mere inches from his. Her voice was calm, but there was a sense of steel in it, sharp and unyielding. "Hi, Tom," she said, her tone almost gentle, but with a venomous undertone. "Surprised? I was too when I found out that you were taming her," she nodded at Linda, "and planning to sleep in their bed. But you know what? I have already filed for divorce. Yesterday. You thought that I wouldn't notice anything, just like him," she pointed at Michael, "but we turned out to be smarter." Tom blinked, his eyes widened, and he tried to say something, but Caitlin raised her hand to stop him. "Don't try," she said, her voice becoming even colder. "I saw your messages, how you boasted that she was almost yours, how you were going to secure it here. Did you think that I would remain your obedient wife while you had fun? No, Tom, this is the end. But that's not all. Our show is just beginning." She straightened up, giving him one last look of contempt, and turned to Michael. He was still looking at Linda, who was now sitting leaning against the bed, her face wet with tears and her body trembling. Tom jerked again, trying to free himself, but the rope held tightly, and he only cursed through his teeth, his voice full of panic. "You're crazy," he croaked, looking from Caitlin to Michael. "Let me go. This is some kind of misunderstanding." Michael turned to him, his fists clenching, but he didn't strike again. Instead, he leaned in, his face so close that Tom instinctively recoiled. "Misunderstanding," Michael repeated, his voice low and menacing. "Do you call this a misunderstanding? You came to my house, to my wife, thinking that I wouldn't know anything. But Emily found out, and I found out. And now here you are, tied up like the dog you wanted me to be. It's not a misunderstanding, Tom. It's your fault." Linda hummed through the tape again, her eyes pleading with Michael, but he didn't look at her. He straightened, stepping back, and nodded to Caitlin. She stood with her arms crossed, her gaze darting between Tom and Linda, and there was a cold confidence in it. She and Michael took the first step, caught them, tied them up, forced them to face the truth. But Caitlin was right. This was just the beginning. Their show, their revenge, their control over the situation only gained momentum. The room froze in tense silence, broken only by Tom's wheezing and Linda's muffled sounds. Michael and Caitlin stood above them, their shadows falling on their bound lovers, and at that moment it was clear. The game had turned upside down, and now they were dictating the rules. The Carters' bedroom, saturated with tension and the smell of pepper spray, became the arena for a new act, an act that Michael and Caitlin decided to enact with cold, almost theatrical cruelty. Linda sat on the floor, her back pressed against the bed, her hands tied, her mouth taped shut, and her eyes, red and wet from tears, darted between Michael and Caitlin. Tom, awake but still in shock, lay nearby, his wrists bound with rope, his face contorted in a mixture of fear and disbelief. They were helpless, caught in a trap that they themselves had provoked, and now something awaited them that they could not foresee. Michael stepped away from Linda, his chest still heaving with anger, but now there was a spark of something else in his eyes, dark, sarcastic satisfaction. He turned to Caitlin, who stood nearby with her arms crossed, her face unreadable, but a cold smile lurking at the corners of her lips. They looked at each other, and at that moment a silent agreement arose between them. Their revenge would not be limited to words or tied hands. They will do more. They will show Linda and Tom that they have lost control, not only of the situation, but also of what they considered theirs. "Honey," Michael said to Caitlin, his voice low and slightly mocking, but loud enough for Linda and Tom to hear every word. "Let's show these idiots what passion really looks like. Did they think they could have fun here? Let them see what a real game is." Caitlin raised an eyebrow slightly, but her smile grew wider, almost predatory. She stepped towards him, her heels clicking on the floor, and nodded, her voice just as cool and confident. "I agree, honey," she answered, playing along with him with the same theatrical intonation. "Let them see what they missed. We are not some pathetic litter that can be tamed. We are better." Michael held out his hand and Caitlin placed her hand in his, their movements slow, demonstrative, as if they had rehearsed this moment. He pulled her towards him, and their lips met in a kiss, not tender, not casual, but deep, passionate, with a clear challenge. It was not just a kiss, but a statement, a weapon aimed straight at the hearts of Linda and Tom. Linda jerked, her muffled scream drowned in the tape, and her eyes widened in horror and disbelief. Tom fidgeted, trying to say something, but the rope and shock kept him in place. Michael pulled away from Caitlin, only to glance at Linda, his lips curling into a sarcastic grin. "Thank you, Linda," he said, his voice laced with venom. "You freed me, as you called it in your chats with Cheryl, right? For 20 years I was tied to you, and now I am free. And guess what? I'm ready for a new life. Look carefully, this is what you lost." He turned to Caitlin again, his hands slid around her waist, and they resumed the kiss, now even more open, even more daring. Caitlin responded with the same energy, her fingers tangling in his hair as they began to move towards the bed, the same bed where Linda had planned her final move with Tom. Michael pushed Caitlin onto the mattress, and she fell with a slight laugh, immediately pulling him towards her. Their movements were confident, almost aggressive, as if they were not just enjoying the moment, but challenging those who lay tied up on the floor. Linda moaned louder, her body trembled, but she could not look away. Her tear-filled eyes followed Michael and Caitlin's every move, a mixture of pain, humiliation, and the knowledge that her own plan had backfired. Tom, still trying to recover from the blow, looked at Caitlin with his mouth open, his face turned purple, but he could not do anything. The rope was holding him like a chain. Michael tore off his shirt, throwing it on the floor next to Linda, and leaned towards Caitlin, whispering something in her ear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They thought they knew how it was done," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But we will show them what real passion is, and not their pathetic affairs." Caitlin laughed, her laugh harsh, almost cruel, and she pulled off her coat, tossing it aside. They began to take off the rest of their clothes, without hesitation, without hiding. Their actions were demonstrative, designed to make Linda and Tom feel not just defeated, but destroyed. Michael took another look at Linda, his eyes sparkling. "This is for Emily," he said, his voice becoming lower, almost threatening, "because you made her see who you really are. She knows, Linda, she knows you betrayed us, and now I do what you wanted. I take my freedom, just not in the way you thought." Caitlin pulled him towards her, and they began to have sex on the bed, not paying attention to the tied-up lovers lying a few feet away. This was not just a physical act, it was a psychological attack, carefully planned to hit Linda and Tom where it hurt the most. Every moan, every movement was like a knife stabbing into their pride, into their confidence, into their illusion of control. Linda closed her eyes, but tears still flowed down her cheeks. Her body shook with sobs that could not escape from under the tape. Tom turned away, his face contorted with rage and humiliation, but he could not close his ears, could not leave. He was forced to listen, watch, feel his own game crumbling. Michael, without stopping, threw barbed phrases at Linda, each of which was like a blow from a whip. "You wanted personal freedom, right?" he said, his voice trembling with tension, but full of sarcasm. "This is my freedom. Enjoy the show, Linda. This is what you wanted from me, only I chose a different partner." Caitlin played along, her voice just as sharp as she addressed Tom. "You thought you tamed her, right?" she said. Her breathing was ragged, but the words cut like a razor. "Now watch how I tame him. You lost, Tom, and this is just the beginning." They continued, their actions becoming more and more explicit, and their words more and more poisonous. Linda and Tom were not just spectators, they were victims, caught in a trap of their own making. Michael and Caitlin didn't just make them watch, they destroyed their world, step by step, with every move, with every word. This was their show, their revenge, and they enjoyed every second of it, knowing that Linda and Tom would never forget it. Linda curled up into a ball, her body trembling and her eyes closed, but the tears still flowed, leaving wet stains on the carpet. Tom gritted his teeth, his face red with anger, but he could do nothing but lie there and listen to his wife and his lover's husband turn their plan upside down. Michael and Caitlin didn't stop. Their passion was not only an act of intimacy, but also an act of power, an act of triumph over those who thought they could break them. This was their moment, their new reality, and they forced Linda and Tom to live it with them, second by second. The Carters' bedroom, saturated with tension and the sounds of the show that had just ended, slowly fell into silence. Michael and Caitlin finished, their breathing still heavy, but their faces frozen in an expression of cold triumph. They were lying on the bed, the same one where Linda had planned her final move with Tom, but now it had become the scene of their revenge. Linda was curled up on the floor, her body trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks, leaving wet stains on the carpet, and the tape over her mouth muffled her sobs. Tom lay next to him. His face was red with anger and humiliation. His eyes were burning, but he was silent, gritting his teeth, still tied with rope. They were both broken, not physically, but mentally, crushed by the spectacle that had just unfolded before them. Michael slowly rose from the bed, pulled on his trousers and shirt, taking his time, as if enjoying every movement. Caitlin followed him, buttoning her blouse. Her movements were just as measured and confident. They didn't look at each other, but there was a strange synchronicity between them, like two soldiers who had just won a battle. Michael walked up to Linda, leaned over, and in one swift motion tore the tape off her mouth. She screamed, her lips trembled, but before she could say anything, he was already untying the rope around her wrists, his fingers working quickly but mercilessly. "Get up," he said, his voice as cold as ice, without a hint of emotion. "The show is over." Caitlin, meanwhile, walked up to Tom, pulled out the folding knife they bought along with the tape from her pocket, and cut the rope on his hands. He jerked, rubbing his wrists where the red marks had been left, and tried to stand up, but his legs shook and he collapsed back onto the floor, looking at her with a mixture of rage and shock. You're crazy," he croaked, his voice weak but full of hatred. Caitlin just grinned, putting the knife in her pocket and stepping back, crossing her arms over her chest. Michael finished untying Linda, and she slowly rose to her knees, her dress rumpled, her face wet with tears, and her eyes full of horror and disbelief. She opened her mouth to say something, but Michael raised his hand to stop her. "Don't," he said, his voice hard as stone. "Don't say anything. You told Cheryl and him everything with your messages." He nodded at Tom. "Now listen to me." He straightened up, looking down at her, his figure seeming huge in the dimness of the bedroom. Linda froze, her breathing ragged, and Tom was still sitting on the floor, rubbing his jaw where Michael had hit him earlier. Caitlin stood next to her. Her gaze was cold, but there was satisfaction in it. They had done what they wanted, and now it was time to complete it. "This house," Michael began, his voice becoming louder so that every word was imprinted in their heads, "is no longer yours, Linda. I rewrote it for Emily, for our daughter. She stays with me. You betrayed her, you betrayed us, and I won't let you take away from her what she deserves. You are no longer the mistress here." Linda gasped, her eyes widened, and she tried to say something, but her voice cracked. "Michael, no, you can't," she began, but he cut her off by stepping closer. "I can," he said, his tone as sharp as a blow, and he did. The lawyer already has the papers. Emily knows what you did, and she chose me. You lost her, Linda. You've lost everything. Tom finally rose to his feet, unsteadily, and glanced at Caitlin, his face contorted with anger. Why are you silent? He growled. Do you think I'll just swallow this? Caitlin turned to him, her smile thin but sharp as a blade. Oh, Tom, she said, her voice calm but full of venom. I am not silent. I'm taking action. The lawyer is already waiting for you. The divorce papers have been filed, and believe me, I will leave you with nothing but your dirty fantasies. But this is not the end. Our show is just getting started, and you'll regret it longer than you think. Tom opened his mouth to protest, but Caitlin had already turned away from him, her gaze meeting Michael's. They nodded to each other, like two allies who had completed a mission, and headed towards the bedroom door. Linda stood up, her legs shaking, and she held out her hand, trying to stop Michael. Michael, wait, I can explain. Her voice was weak, pleading, but he didn't even turn around. No explanation, he said, stopping in the doorway. By evening, you will no longer be here. Both, take your things and get out. This is not your home anymore. Caitlin took one last look at Tom, her eyes flashing with cold contempt. And don't think you can get out of it, she added. Michael and I are a team now. And we're not done yet. They left the bedroom, their footsteps echoing down the stairs, leaving Linda and Tom in a room that now seemed alien to them. Linda fell to her knees, her hands covering her face, and she began to sob, her sobs loud, desperate. Tom stood clenching his fists, his eyes darting around the room, but he didn't know what to do. His confidence, his boasting, everything had collapsed in one evening. They were alone, untied, but still caught in the trap they themselves had created. Michael and Caitlin walked down into the living room, their faces calm, but their eyes sparkling. They didn't look back, didn't stop, didn't doubt. The door to the house slammed behind them, and Michael threw his last words over his shoulder, echoing down the empty corridor. By evening, Linda, you won't be here by evening. They went outside, the evening air was cool, and the sky was already darkening. Michael and Caitlin stopped at his car, looked at each other, and nodded silently to each other. Their revenge was complete, or, as Caitlin said, it had just begun. Linda and Tom were left behind, crushed, humiliated, while Michael and Caitlin stepped forward, knowing that they now held all the cards in this game. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.